The whole idea and the message of the end of Parshas Balak, Parshas Pinchas, is a person has to stand up for what's right. When we know that something is wrong and we can make a difference and an impact, we have to stand up for it and say that this is wrong. It says at the end of Parshas Balak that Pinchas saw what was happening over there. Pinchas saw that Cosby and Zimri were involved in illicit relations, and he stood up and he took a spear in his hand. And he took care of business. He stood up for what was wrong, a public desecration of Hashem's name, people who were involved with the most immoral acts possible. And he took the spear, and he took care of what needed to be taken care of. Why is the word roimach spelt without a vav? Reish mem ches. Where is the vav? Question one. Question two. What practical lessons could we derive from this? Question three. Why wasn't Pinchas afraid that Zimri Cosby would retaliate and attempt to kill him in self-defense? And lastly, we find throughout Tanakh that when someone tried to kill someone else, they made a shinoi, they changed it. For example, Sefer Shoftim by Ehud, Paragimel Pasuk Tezayin. Ehud was a lefty. He kept his sword under his right thigh in the sheath so that no one would suspect him of having a weapon. The sword is usually in most people are righties, and it's usually in the sheath is on the left, so no one would suspect him of having a weapon. And Ehud successfully entered the palace of Eglon, the king of Moab, and killed him. And the Jews were then freed. Another example is in Shmuel Bey's Chof Tester Yud. So why didn't Pinchas attempt to make a change, so to say, when he killed Cosby and Zimri? Nachlasi, my great-great-grandfather, explains that the numerical value, the gematria of the word roimach, is 248. This corresponds to the 240 positive mitzvahs. We know the Gemara at the end of Makos tells us, Torah tziva lanu Moshe Menashe kilas Yaakov Dora shabi semlai. Gemara towards the end of Makos says that we know that we have 613 mitzvahs. Why Torah tziva lanu Moshe? The gematria of Torah is what? 611 plus 2 mitzvahs we heard directly from Hashem. Anochi Hashem Elokecha lo yichal elokim achirim al panai. So therefore 611 plus 2, 613. We know that we have 613 mitzvahs. The question are, what are the 613 mitzvahs? We have a massive discussion argument between the greats, the Rambam, in a Sefer Mitzvahs, the Chinuch, Rav Sajagon, we have a lot, Rav Haigon rather, we have a lot of what exactly are the 613 mitzvahs. But we have 240 positive mitzvahs, says the Gemara, corresponding to the limbs in a person. And we have 365 negative passive mitzvahs, which correspond to the days of the year. So Pinchas was saying, I'm taking right now all of the mitzvahs in my hand, I'm putting my full-fledged trust in Hashem. And in the merit of all of these mitzvahs, I'm going to be protected from possible harm. This is why the vav is missing, because if the vav is missing, then the gematria, that value of roimach, would it be equivalent to 248? Deeper idea over here of what's happening tangentially. It says in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Samach Aleph Sif Gimel, in Shema, there are 245 words. In order to get to 248, we say Hashem Elokeichem Emes at the end of Shema. That's the idea. And over there, if you take a look at the Mishnah Berurah and Sivkot and Vav, he quotes a Medrash and a Zohar that says that someone who says Shema according to Lacha, every single limb is going to get healed by that word when it is recited properly in Shema. If it's recited properly. Very important over here. Shal Tshuva Soal Aryeh in Chelik Al Siman Shin Gimel says since women have 242 limbs, therefore by their saying Kel Malchanam, and they wouldn't get the proper number, and therefore if they daven by themselves without him, and you wouldn't say Hashem L'Keichemes, they shouldn't even say Kel Malchanam. The custom isn't that way, but it's a custom, and they say it anyways. But that's why we say Kel Malchanam when we don't have the minyan. The answer is to get to this 248.
Women have
limit over here. That's right. It's a Mishnah actually in Adios, if I'm not mistaken. That's right. Now let's explain the previous questions. The roimach is that above so that we could get to 248. Pinchas wasn't afraid of a danger. Why? Because he was taking the protection from the mitzvahs. Pinchas didn't need to make a change because a change is only needed when someone is trying to be extra cautious and careful. However, Pinchas was already protected with this 248 mitzvahs. Pinchas demonstrated sincere, proper belief in Hashem, bitachon, like the pasuk in Koheles says in Chesed, someone who shomer mitzvah lo yedid. You keep mitzvahs, you won't know of anything bad. The lesson that we could learn from this episode is we can't be lured into temporary lusts and desires. And if we see something that's halachically wrong, we have to disagree. That's exactly what Pinchas did. If you're around a person and he says something and it's contrary to a true belief, he says something that's totally off, you have to stand up for that. Because if you're not, then people are going to think that you agree to it or you have nothing to say, you have no response. That's why in the second paragraph it says, Da mashatashiv lapikoiris. You have to know what to answer a heretic, someone who is not going according to Torah beliefs. Torah Shabbat Peh, someone goes against what it says in our Torah Shabbat Peh, oral law, that's going to be a problem. The oral Torah, that's going to be a problem. Person has to stand up. If they don't, shtika kehodah dami, it's as if you agree. So a person has to stand up when something is wrong that is happening over here. The Chinuch explains in Mitzvah Beis, and that's what Pinchas did. The Chinuch explains in Mitzvah Beis that this is precisely what Mila is about. We get Mila in our bodies to show we are distinguished, we are set apart. Just like physically we're different, so too spiritually. That's exactly where Zimri sinned, from the Makom Mila, the place of where he has the bris. Pinchas wanted to demonstrate, no, we can't be part of this. We are different. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in Siman Gimel Oz Beis says that we dress differently, we talk differently, we're totally different. That's what Pinchas stood up for. This episode is especially applicable in the summertime when we learn about this parsha over here. People are dressing immorally, they're dressing inappropriately. We have to keep those thoughts positive. We have to keep it clear. This is the idea 248. Tangentially, a lot of people don't realize if you look at the Shari Tshuva over there in the simon that we just quoted about saying Kel Melech Ne'eman and Baruch and Hashem Elokeichem Emes. If a person is in the middle of Shema and the Chazan is saying Hashem Elokeichem Emes, stop. Wherever you are in the middle of Shema, stop and listen. Because how could it be that you're going to be fulfilling your obligation of reciting Shema while also simultaneously tapping into Shomei Ka'ona, listening to the Chazan saying those three words of Hashem Elokeichem Emes, and then it will count for you towards your words? The answer is you can't. You can't be doing two things at once. If you stop whatever you're up to, very few people know this because it's the Mishnah Berurah doesn't quote it, but this is the halacha. It seems like the Shari Tshuva quotes it. You should stop, listen to those three words, and then continue. That's very important. To the extent that the poskim say, wherever you are in davening, as long as it's not during Shemona Esrei, of course. If you were in Pesukah de Zimra and you heard those three words, you should stop, listen to them, and then when you get up to Shema later, you would not say Kel Melech Ne'eman before. But this is the idea. This is the message of Pinchas. Stand up, what's right. This is the same Pinchas who we learned about in Sefer Yeshua. He's one of the two spies who successfully sent in. And that is the idea. Any questions, comments?
Pretty hard sometimes if you're behind, it's a faster minion to hear Hashem Elokeichem Emes when you're trying to catch up.
Yeah, good. Look, optimally, you should never be in that situation. You should have been there earlier. And you should have got a head start in the davening. I'm just talking about a hypothetical situation. Once every couple of years, a person comes a few minutes late. Every day, we're assuming person is coming. He's going to learn a few minutes before davening anyway, so it wouldn't be a problem. Okay, then your next step.
Shmoa.
Yeah, yeah.